After printing Lego bricks for a while, I discovered that some blocks are a lot harder to print than others, so today I'm ranking them in a tier list, starting with the easiest and working my way up to the ones that are nearly impossible to print. If you're not familiar with how the blocks are made, basically I print white squares on the surface that show me exactly where the block should go. Then I carefully position them as precisely as possible to make sure the textures line up perfectly, and then I start printing. Now that you know the basics, let's start with some blocks that are effortless to print. In the easy category, I've got all the blocks with identical textures on each side, like dirt, cobblestone and gravel. I can print this with ease, and even if they aren't perfectly positioned, you'd never notice since the textures are so simple. Blocks like the walls and powders also belong here. In the medium category, I'm placing the grass block, pumpkin and watermelon, since they use two different textures, making them a bit harder to print. I'm also adding corridors, because even though they have the same texture on every side, their designs make any misalignment much more noticeable. Now we are getting to the hard part. A good example for this category is the oak block. At first glance, it might seem easy, but its top design is a nightmare. The thin lines on the edges make every tiny movement in the texture stand out, even the slightest misalignment is noticeable, and the best I can do is minimize it as much as possible. The rest of the blocks in this category follow the same principle. For example, the tinty block has a white background behind the text, and all sides on the edges needs to match perfectly, or it will look off. The wheat and the barrel blocks are even more challenging, because their lines are even tinier and there are two of them, making this probably the hardest to print in this category. Now we are moving on to the tricky blocks, and the crafting table is definitely one of the most challenging. It was one of the first blocks I ever printed, and with lines running right to the edges on every side, even the tiniest misalignment becomes super noticeable. Here's a comparison between the one I just printed and one of my first attempts. You can clearly see how the lines on the old one are much thinner on one side than the other. The second block is the cartography table, which stands out by having 4 different textures, all because of the globe in the center. When printed just right, it looks really satisfying, especially with the globe perfectly aligned. The fletching table also makes it into this category because of the small black line that runs all around the block, which stands out so much against its light brown color. I almost forgot about the dried kelp block since I never use it, but still, the white lines on each side would be so difficult to position properly, making it a real challenge to print. Now it's time for the impossible category, where things get seriously challenging. The first block, and probably the hardest to print, is the beacon. Its design features a center cube, creating a 3D effect. This means I need to print not only the outside, but also the interior, and this dual challenge makes it incredibly tough to get everything just right. The slime block also belongs in this category, as it presents the same level of difficulty as the beacon due to the cube inside, making it just as challenging to print. Next, we have the cauldron and composter, which are probably a little easier, but still require a lot of attention due to the 3D appearance of their tops. And finally we have the mob spawner, which wouldn't be too hard if it were empty, but that's never the case. There's always a mob inside, and it would be interesting to see how it looks when printed correctly. So which of these impossible blocks would you like to see me try to print? Drop a comment below and let me know.